The mergeMap operator maps each value to an observable and then flattens these observables by subscribing internally, emitting the results. Let's take a look at a diagram to make this more clear. Each time the source observable emits a value, the function you supply to mergeMap is invoked. The observable returned by this function is then subscribed to internally. From that point forward, whenever the inner observable emits a value, mergeMap also emits that value. So when the inner observable emits 0, mergeMap emits 0. The same with each value moving forward. By default, mergeMap does not limit the number of active inner subscriptions, so if the source emits another value, this is again mapped to an observable and a second inner subscription is created. Whenever any active inner observable emits a value, that value is emitted by mergeMap. Let's move this example to code to see how it looks. I went ahead and created an observable of click events using fromEvent and an interval observable that emits a new value every 1 second. To start checking out the behavior of mergeMap, let's map each click to a new interval observable like we had in the opening diagram. So let's go ahead and import mergeMap now from rxjs/operators. Now let's take the click observable and call pipe, and let's apply the mergeMap operator. For the function, we'll just ignore the event and return the 1 second interval observable. Let's go ahead and subscribe and log this to the console. So for every click, we are mapping to this interval observable. mergeMap will then flatten this result by subscribing to the returned observable, emitting any emitted values. Let's save and see this in action. When I click, this starts the interval observable and we can see the values being emitted. mergeMap doesn't have a limit on inner subscriptions, so if we click again, we now have 2 intervals running. Clicking again starts a third interval, and this could go on forever. Let's comment out the subscription for a second to stop these intervals. The fact that mergeMap doesn't put a limit on subscriptions for inner observables is what makes it unique, but it's also what can make it dangerous. For instance, in this example, the interval observables we had would have run forever. If you forget to clean up long-running inner observables like this when using mergeMap, you can run into unintended consequences and memory leaks. So knowing this, when does it make sense to use mergeMap as a flattening operator? Well, the first case is when you want fine-grained control over the lifetime of any inner observable, particularly if this depends on output from another observable. So suppose if instead of click events here, we had a stream of mouse down events, and we only wanted to run the interval observable until mouse up. So let's go ahead and create 2 new observables. The first will be for mouse down, and the second will be for mouse up. And let's switch out the events also to mouse down and mouse up. We can now uncomment our observable and switch out our click stream for our mouse down stream. And instead of this inner interval running forever, we're going to limit it based on the mouse up stream. So we can call pipe on our interval observable and supply the take until operator. We can then pass it the mouse upstream as a notifier, so anytime there's a mouse up event, the inner observable will be completed. Now, instead of the inner observable running forever, we're giving it a finite life based on another event that we know will occur. When I save now and hold down, we can see the interval running, but as soon as I let my mouse up, take until completes the inner observable. Another popular use case for mergeMap is HTTP requests, particularly saves. Let's return to an example from one of the first lessons in the course to see what I mean. In this example, we had a stream of click events we were transforming into a stream of x and y coordinates using the map operator. So every time we click on the document, the coordinates of that click are emitted. Now suppose if instead of just logging this to the console, we want to trigger a request on each click in order to save that location to analyze later. To do this, we could use the mergeMap operator. Let's first add an import for the Ajax creation operator, as we'll be using that for our request. Next, let's add mergeMap to our operator imports. We want to use our coordinates observable in order to initiate our request, so let's remove the subscribe now. Since we may want to reuse this somewhere else in our application, let's create a new constant called coordinates to hold the coordinates observable. Next, let's also create a new constant called coordinates with save. This will use the coordinate stream, adding a save request with each emission using mergeMap with the Ajax observable. So let's call pipe on the coordinates observable, and we will use mergeMap. And our function will take the coordinates and use the ajax.post method to make an Ajax observable that initiates a post request. For this example, I'm just going to paste in a URL of a mock API that will just return a 200 every time. And for the body parameter, I'll just supply the coordinates object that was emitted. And that's it. Let's just subscribe to the coordinates with save observable now and check this out. So for every click, we're mapping to just the coordinates using the map operator. We are then using this coordinate stream to map to an AJAX observable to make a post request, flattening the result. This just means that the observable returned from our function will be subscribed to internally with any emitted items being emitted by mergeMap, in this case, the response to the request. Let's check out the network tab to make sure this is working. And now on every click, you can see the post request that's fired. If we go back to the console, we can see the response is being logged by the subscribe function. mergeMap makes a great operator for these type of fire and forget save scenarios. However, if we need to guarantee the order of saves, or if we are making GET requests that can be canceled, there are better operators for the job that we will learn about in the next 3 lessons. To recap, the mergeMap operator maps a value to an inner observable, flattening the result. By default, mergeMap does not put a limit on active inner subscriptions. Some common use cases for mergeMap are HTTP requests you do not wish to be canceled, like POST, or when you plan on controlling the lifetime of inner observables you are mapping to, using operators like take or take until. Be cautious when using mergeMap, as forgetting to complete long-running inner observables can cause unintended consequences in memory leaks.